Okay, well, thank you all for coming and welcome. What we want to do here today is kind of share with you where we're at on a project to try to map some student learning outcomes to associate level IT program. And so let's just introduce ourselves real quick and then we'll get started. My name is Nichols. I am a division chair at Estrella Community College, which is in Avondale, Arizona. And my division is called Instructional Computing, and in that division we cover all sorts of IT disciplines: networking, programming, system administration, multimedia, and computer science.
Is that ICT?
It is ICT. Go ahead and put a C in there. So that's next.
My name is Cara Tang, and I'm a faculty member at Portland Community College in Portland, Oregon, and I teach courses in the Computer Information Systems Department. So we're excited to be here today to report on this. This project has been going on for a couple of years, and we actually reported at the previous two MPICTs, someone from our committee. So we're from the Committee for Computing Education in Community Colleges, which is a committee of the ACM, standing committee of the ACM Ed Board. And so we're focused exclusively on two-year programs, community colleges, and computing. And so the previous two MPICTs, one of our members, Bob Campbell, our vice chair, who's the vice chair of our committee, reported at the past two MPICTs actually about the progress of this report. And now we're excited to be able to kind of give you guys the final draft. So we are in the final stages of the project. We have a final reviewer's draft that is out, that's been available since November, and it's open for comments. It will be open for comments for another week. So we'd like to get feedback from you guys and comments on that. And you can give that to us today or later. So we'll kind of, first of all, talk a little bit about the process that we went through to create these guidelines. And then we'll actually look at the guidelines themselves, and hopefully we can get some good discussion and some feedback from you guys on the guidelines. So, as I said, this process has been going on for a few years, and the first part, the phase one of the project, was really just to determine whether there was even a need for IT curriculum guidelines at the associate degree level. And so there was assembled a diverse working group from industry and academia who pondered this and came up with some recommendations. And the key conclusions from their recommendations were, first of all, that there is indeed a compelling need for IT curricular guidance at the associate degree level. And then, but also that the typical model that's built upon a comprehensive body of knowledge is not well suited to the dynamic field of IT. So then, what should this guidance look like? So it should be built on a framework of core learning outcomes. So these would be constituted by core IT competencies. So if you think about all the different IT degrees out there, there's a lot of them, a lot of degrees with different specializations that could be considered IT. So the recommendation here was to focus on really the core of that. You can think about the intersection of all those degrees. What is really the core of IT that a student who comes away with any IT-related degree, these are kind of some core IT content that they should have. So that's the focus. And also we wanted these guidelines to be influenced by current and future needs of business and industry, certifications, related curricula, government and standards bodies, new and emerging technology, and international perspectives. So all of these things have an impact on our field, on IT, and want to take these things into account. But also, we really want to come up with some guidelines that are designed to provide staying power and adaptability. As this is a changing field, we don't want to have guidelines that are going to be outdated in 2 years. And then the final recommendation was that the guidelines be accompanied by meaningful evaluation metrics. So it was decided, obviously, to move forward to create some guidelines based on those recommendations. And so we moved on to phase two. And in phase two, these are just some of the related curricula and models that were sort of inputs into this work. So we had the U.S. Department of Labor IT competency model that was looked at closely, the European Union's ICT competencies, EMC's 5 pillars of IT, and then the ACM also has guidelines for 4-year IT programs, undergraduate degree programs in IT. And CSTA, the Computer Science Teachers Association, they have some what they call strands, and that's a group that looks at pre-college, so K through 12. You know, we could look at the high school guidelines that they have, and then also the ACM model for computational thinking in IT. And the group of people that was put together, participants kind of fell into 3 categories. We had subject matter experts from business and industry, and we had people from all of these different companies that you see here. And then we also had 2-year college faculty involved from these various colleges that you see listed here. And then the third group of people was assessment experts. So one of the key points was that we want to come up with meaningful evaluation metrics that would be a part of this. And so we had some assessment experts to really help us, you know, get that right. And so this kind of kicked off with an intense 2-day meeting in New York where all those participants you saw on the previous slide were involved. And we composed and vetted student learning outcomes. So really the heart of the guidelines, these IT curricular guidelines that we have, are these student learning outcomes. And so we created those, and then also we had training by the A team, which was our assessment team, training on writing assessment rubrics. Then we went and we wrote some assessment rubrics. They helped us out with that. And the product that came out of this New York meeting, and you know, some subsequent minor improvements, was our first reviewers draft. And our first reviewers draft was distributed to over 1,000 individuals that we have in our affiliate database. Some of you may have seen it. It was presented at the SIGITE conference in Calgary. We had a booth at SIGC, and also it was available on CapSpace, which is the website for our committee. So it went out on all those venues, and we got some feedback. And then continuing the work, after receiving that feedback, we set up a couple more meetings with smaller groups. We had a West Coast meeting and an East Coast meeting where we considered the feedback that we received. We reviewed and adjusted the learning outcomes. And we also then, based on the new set of outcomes, crafted the assessment rubrics that would go with those. And then we also worked on mapping the outcomes to other curricula. So this was something we wanted to do to help other groups of people who may be familiar with certain related curricula kind of have a handle into our curriculum guidelines and our outcomes to help understand them and see how they map to something that people might be familiar with. And the product of this is now the current reviewers draft. So the draft that we have out now, which is our final draft, has been available since November, and again, feedback on that is due a week from today. So we're hoping to get some good feedback on that. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Jim to talk about what's actually in the IT guidelines.
Thank you. So it was pretty much, as Kara's described, 3 main, I'll say, products: the outcomes themselves, the assessment rubrics that can be used to assess the student learning in those areas, and then also the mappings to other models and other curriculum. So first we'll overview that, and then we'll jump in and take a look at it. Okay? So one thing that we just want to emphasize is that these outcomes were focused on the idea of a core IT program rather than a specialized program in a subdiscipline. As such, we try to keep the level of the student learning outcomes written at one of the first 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, trying to keep it generalized, knowing that any specific program, like an academy program of some sort, is going to go deeper and is going to be specialized. But we're trying to keep this, I'd say, more wide than deep, such that it could be used, for instance, for a transfer model or something along those lines as well, which is kind of interesting because I think that the session prior to this one in this room did just that. So perfect. That's exactly what it meant. Do you want to go through this? As far as the assessment rubrics, and we'll take a look at the actual ones here in a moment, but just to give you an idea of their structure. Essentially, each one of these learning outcomes, and there's 48 total learning outcomes that span between technical areas and also more behavioral areas. But each one of those outcomes have been, it's been provided with a 3-level, a 3-tiered rubric, such that you get a picture of what it looks like to meet that expectation or to meet that student learning outcome, or to fall below or to exceed above it. And this is put in there such that you can more easily incorporate the outcomes into courses or programs. You can use it towards assessment efforts, towards accreditations. You can see, and you also get a better feel for what is meant by it. Sometimes just a single line student learning outcome, it's hard to conceptualize. You get a little bit more flavor of it when you put it together with the assessment examples. So further clarity. Okay, and then finally, if you go to the next slide, and then we'll pop backwards, the mappings. So there were a variety of things, some of which were actually inputs to the process. We wanted to turn around and take these student learning outcomes and map them back to things like the U.S. Department of Labor model, CSTA standards, ACM classification systems, Bloom's taxonomy. Give it different context so you could see, you could approach it from different ways depending on what the goals of any particular project was. So we'll take a look at these mappings in a moment as well. Okay, I think the next slide has got some links. So if you go ahead and hit the reviewer's draft, posted on the front page of CapSpace is oh, I think it's no worries. Okay. I'll zoom down here to this listing. Okay, so posted on the front page of CapSpace is a link to basically a call for feedback for the reviewer's draft. We've passed out some links in case you have them on mobile device, a laptop or a tablet. We do have a few copies of that go more in depth, but it's a fairly lengthy document, so we didn't want to land in the streets. We figured that this group would probably have some access there. Just gives you an idea of one of the ways that you can look at this. And as I mentioned, there's different avenues from which to view these outcomes. But one of the ways to look at them is from a program competency standpoint. And so, let's say you're putting together an associate level program in IT. You're going to have program outcomes, and so we put these competencies or these outcomes into program groupings. And you can see there in kind of the beige bar up top, the first grouping is critical thinking, problem solving, and theoretical foundations. And that's a broad grouping under which most of the technical areas will fall. So most of the things you would expect to see are going to fall into this group. Okay? And then in gray, you're seeing kind of a program outcome, an aggregate of the outcomes, so these student learning outcomes that follow. And so this first area, I think what we'll do is we'll just introduce each of these gray areas, and then we'll go back and spend
these fall into the categories of Bloom's taxonomy that you're not using.
What windows?
Analysis.
So these outcomes, there are specific lists of verbs that go with each of the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and so we only chose verbs from the first 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy.
Are you referring to the gray area, the program outcome, or are you referring to the active student learning?
It says the critical thinking, problem solving.
Right, so this is a grouping. This is general headings. The outcomes themselves, these that are numbered, these are the ones that are meant to be kept within the first 3 layers of Bloom's. Does that make sense? So if you're looking in that beige area, you're looking at a grouping heading. It's not written as an outcome. It's not meant to be an outcome. It's simply meant to define these as more of theoretical foundations, problem solving, as opposed to some of the behavioral areas that we'll look at later, including interpersonal skills and teamwork and those sorts of things. And that beige area is not meant to be written as an outcome. It's a grouping heading. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's take a look at these gray areas so you can kind of get an idea of the program level outcomes, and then we'll come back and look at the learning outcomes that inform each one. So in this first area, we're looking at client computing and user support, things that would affect supporting the end user or the end user workstation. Then in this second area, we're looking at database and information management, so things associated with data. This next grouping will focus on networking and convergence. Oh, did I skip one? Sorry. Digital media and immersive technology. That was an interesting one to discuss, I'll tell you that. So multimedia kind of ideas that fall within IT. And then scrolling down more. Programming and application development. And then server storage and virtualization. And then you'll see that we get into these other major headings. And what we're doing here is kind of leaving the technical and moving more to the behavioral. And we're looking at those things that are often called soft skills, things like teamwork and interpersonal communications, the ability to read and understand technical information, effective writing in a technical area. So this first area then would be communication and interpersonal skills. And you can see that that first program outcome deals with teamwork. And then here we have the ability to read and interpret technical information. And then as we move down here, we're looking more at professionalism, things like being able to function effectively on the job. And so we're very much interested in continuous learning. I've heard in other sections of the conference about this idea that if you're going to work in IT, you're always learning the next thing because the field is always changing. So that the ability to engage in continuous learning, and then a focus on ethics, professional, legal behavior. So these are the program outcomes within the groupings, but then they're made up of the actual student learning outcomes, and that was the meat of the work, is to focus on putting those together in such a way that they can be done at the associate's degree level in a core curriculum rather than a specialization, and that collectively they will add to your program. So I do want to make it more discussion oriented here. Is there any certain area that you'd like to go back and collectively look at together? Servers or networking or databases?
I have a question though. You didn't mention it in your work, but did you try a little bit like the presentation before to try to fit this into a certain number of courses and units? Or did you go that far?
Can you repeat the question for those online?
So the question is, have we attempted mapping, as I understand it, have we attempted mapping these outcomes to an actual model program, to an actual curriculum? And yeah, so there's two things. Yes, that's been done, and as we come to the end of the presentation, we're asking that more of that be done. We actually have a call out for schools to contribute their own mappings. Take a look at your programs or proposed programs, map to these outcomes and see how it matches up.
Okay, right. So we don't have like a model curriculum that uses these outcomes, but we'd love to see examples of courses, you know, at your guys' colleges on how these outcomes would fit into your courses. How do these relate to the course outcomes that you have for your courses? And that's one of the things that we'd like to put also into the final draft when we publish it after this final review session. So that's something we're looking for.
It's really kind of interesting because I've done some of that work on my own, just for my own school, to see how it matches up. And it's really sort of interesting when you look at these more specialized tracks within IT, such as Cisco Academy. If you overlay that on this, of course, it's very strong in the networking area, right? But it's far stronger than this, in fact, because it goes higher up in business taxonomy. It's wider than this is intended to be. But then there's other areas, of course, that doesn't address because it's not intended to. So it's kind of interesting to see depth versus width when you start to compare existing programs to this proposed, wide look.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest. As an academy, you have access to the scope and sequence document with all the outcomes, and can certainly overlay that. And then it emphasizes computer networking, but it also adds in soft skills and critical thinking and some other 21st century skills along with that.
Could you summarize that comment so that they can hear it online?
Just that, for instance, with this Cisco Academy, you can. You're asking me someone? anyway, the comment was along the lines of the Cisco Academy. You can look at its objectives, its scope and sequence, overlay it with these proposed or these student learning outcomes from this project, and you'll see that in addition to networking, there are soft skills and other sorts of skills built into Cisco as well. And previously, my comment was just meant to see the contrast between width and depth. Certainly didn't mean to slight Cisco in any way. We love it. We're Cisco Academy.
I was wondering if you could address the digital media piece while you were going through, and I looked at it and thinking, I'm trying to figure that one out, and you seem to imply that there was a little bit of a controversy about it. I was just wondering if you could address that.
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting discussion and multiple discussions in our various meetings. So if you go all the way back to some of the inputs, such as say the U.S. Department of Labor model, there is a skill set in there called multimedia. There's other terms that kind of interrelate, immersive technologies, and so there were some people with expertise that got off on the side, put together some of the competencies, put together some of the assessments, and then what we did was brought it back to the larger group, all the IT people from all the different sub-disciplines, and discussed it. And it was just interesting to see that a lot of people in other areas of IT just kind of winking at that one, because I don't think that there's a whole lot of interplay between some of the other IT skills and some of the multimedia skills.
Right,
yeah.
That's true in our institution.
But it's interesting because as we continued the conversation, we started to see more and more. So if you talk about multimedia, you start to think about things like web design and web development as functions of media, but then there's also files associated with that need protocols and transfer and server support, and so you start to see how some of these outcomes that relate to multimedia mesh into networking and system administration.
I was curious about number 20. Differentiate among a variety of technology-based sensory interaction. Right.
Yeah, that was one with
I was curious about that.
That was one with much discussion. Where that came from is we started out by trying to get to the idea of immersive technologies. We're talking about things like Google Glasses, or maybe a variety of technologies that might have some kind of sensory input, and that led to some kind of side areas where, well, what about like adaptive technology for the disabled? That could fall into this category. And then even what about like touchpads on mobile devices or voice activation? Or so we started to realize that there was a lot of different parts of the five senses that interact with user interfaces, in addition to simply the traditional.
Thank you. That was great.
This is obviously very strong body of work and very esoteric, and it's the first time I've previewed it or taken a look at it. But once the framework is fully baked, I mean, what's the goal? Do you want to distribute this as almost like a standards for people that are developing curriculum to sort of follow as a guideline, or what? I mean, ultimately, what do you want to do with this?
Yeah, I think that we're careful to not use the word standards, more of guidance, such that we've got educators and industry folks together to come up with a definition, if you will, of what a two-year program at the associate's level would look like. So how could that be used? That could be used in a number of ways. You could use it as an educator or a chair or even a dean to do program building. You could use it for program review. You could use the assessment piece for assessment efforts that might lead to accreditation inputs. When you look at the mappings to other pieces such as the CSTA connection and the SIGITE connection, you could see how it might inform articulation models to the K-12 or to the university. If we look at the mappings and we look at the different ways you could view this, I think you might start to see some of its uses.
Yeah, we're hoping to use it to support our transfer of curriculum eventually.
Okay.
We've indicated that.
Well, I do want to show you the cap space in ways that you could view it from different angles, but I don't want to move on too quickly. Were there other discussions that you wanted to have just on the outcomes?
Quickly for me. Was there a placement regarding like business acumen? A lot of the other sessions have talked about how it's important to have IT workers who understand the whole business scenario. Is there something in there?
I'm trying to recall. Our 48 customer service 43.
Yeah, so there's quality customer service up here. There are a few different places where we look at cycles, the software development cycle, business cycle. That first category at top is help desk, so it looks at some of those customer support kind of issues. So I would say that those things are probably threaded throughout as opposed to their own category. But certainly that was our intention. I wonder if Beth was making any comment on the chat.
He says you're doing great.
Oh, good. Okay, then let's take a look. If you wanted to go back to the presentation and hit that next link. In fact, it might be good for I'll drive this part. All right, so if you're not familiar with CAP-Space, CAP stands for Curriculum Assessment Pedagogy, and this is the website for our committee. And this committee has done a variety of projects along these lines. And so under this link right here for curricula, you'll find that there's program inventories or course inventories that help you to view these sorts of projects, and they can be viewed from different approaches. So we've linked directly to this program inventory page. I just wanted to point a few things out. For instance, we can look at program outcomes. Let's see, I think it's under career, and we go to information technology, and it brings up a link. And so then this link kind of shows them all together. So you kind of ask them the question, what does it look like, advertising program? And so it's the same kind of grouping. So you've got a program group for communication and interpersonal skills, which focuses on teamwork and reading and writing technical information. And then these competencies support those. And then here is the critical thinking, problem-solving skills. And these bullets, these program competencies are the gray areas from the previous sheets. And then all of the outcomes that support those areas are listed here, just alphabetically. So you can chew on those. And then if we continue, we'll see that there's a section here on professionalism and ethics and that sort of thing. So put it together, and this puts it all on one page, and you can see it from a program perspective. This could inform program building for a 2-year IT program. Also, however, if we back up here, we can also look at the program classification mappings. So if we go here under career, we can choose to look at the IT core competencies. We'll go with classification category first. And you can see that these same outcomes have been mapped to all of these different models and systems. Okay. So if we did something, for instance, like shows the U.S. Department of Labor competency model, it shows us the different workplace competencies, I should say, technical competencies associated with IT from the U.S. Department of Labor model, and each one of them is a drop-down that shows the outcome from this project that's related to that area. So if you had need to map curriculum to the U.S. Department of Labor model, maybe for grant application or something along those lines, that's all here kind of pre-sorted. To show you a different model, if you need to see it from the perspective of Bloom's taxonomy for reasons of assessment for your college or something that might have to do with accreditation visit or something, you can look at each one of these competencies by its Bloom's level. We can also CSTA. We map these to the CSTA computer science standards for K through 12. The few that the levels 3B and 3C that were associated with these areas. So if you were trying to maybe articulate with a K-12 school, see how those graduates might come into the program, we have it mapped that way as well. So you can see which of the outcomes map to which of the CST areas. So we attempted to give multiple ways of looking at this to fit whatever need a viewer might have. Have any questions, or do you want to look at any particular mapping?
I'm just wondering, with the nearly 4 billion competencies,
right.
About how many courses are you thinking it might span?
You know, and that's a really interesting question because we purposely tried to avoid the idea of mapping courses because we knew that there was so much variation between different programs. You know, if you looked at a Cisco program versus, I don't know, pick another one, a VMware program or something like that, a lot of these competencies are going to be in both programs, but the courses are not going to match up. So we tried to avoid pre-populating courses, rather looked at them almost like a knowledge unit, free-floating outcomes. I know that if you looked at an existing program and you attempted to map it back to this, it's certainly doable within a 2-year program, especially when some of these areas, the behavioral areas as opposed to technical areas, can map to even general education categories.
Yeah, another thing to think about as far as that question goes is, you know, these represent just the core of an IT program. So this would not be specialized in any particular area, but it would just be, so, you know, someone going through like a networking program would want to have all these things, but then also going further than, you know, more detailed in networking.
We have networking fundamentals, but not the higher levels. Is there a question?
So one of the very interesting things that I see is not related to, which would be very interesting to look at, is the CS Principles movement.
Okay.
Because there's a real movement to try to get K-12 students into understanding computing principles. And right now it's very heavily populated with very traditional computer scientists. And to be able to really show that it is also indicative of computing specialties would be very nice as well.
Excellent.
So I do think, and I think a lot of this would flow very nicely with the CS principles and would give a very different perspective to that business.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great feedback, and that's one of the main things that we want to do here today is get feedback like that to see how we can improve and make this more useful going forward.
Maybe, I don't know if everybody is familiar with CS Principles. Maybe I am, but you know, CS Principles is a new AP program that is being valued right now, correct?
You probably know better than I would.
So CS Principles is an effort to create a new AP process that looks more at the fundamentals of computing and not just Java programming. Because currently the ACCS exam is only Java programming. And this is to really have students understand or get a much greater appreciation for what computing is all about.
So is it like, regardless of language, it's just talk about the concept?
There's all sorts of different concepts in it, yes. So it does get into a little bit of some amount of programming, but on a very low level like Scratch or Alice or something like that to really understand the fundamental underlying principles of it. It gets into a little bit of web design. It gets into a little bit of, you know,
Is it still a pair of courses, one course?
It is, so you can look it up. It's a project. They are preparing some testing for it, and it's going to be like AP. So ultimately, I think by 2016, that's their goal. It is going to be a program that will be taken by high school students. Besides, it's a new AP course, a new edition, testing.
Right.
And then the classes in high school will prepare for that. And it's kind of another level, we say maybe a little bit lower than AP computer science, you know, but it will be available as an AP course in their high schools.
And if you want to know more about it, you can go to csprinciples.org.
.org,
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Is there any other discussion related to these mappings or any other proposed mappings? All right, if you'd like to continue.
Okay, so maybe this slide will spark a little bit of discussion. Just wanted to throw this out here. This shows the distribution of all our student learning outcomes. There's 48 student learning outcomes in our curriculum guidelines, and this shows their distribution across these 3 Bloom's levels. So again, these are the lowest 3 Bloom's levels, starting with remembering, understanding, then applying. And we've got seven of our outcomes are at the lowest level, the remembering level. Almost half, 23, are at the understanding level, and then 18 are at the applying level. So just to give you an idea of the distribution. So, you know, just ask the question, does this seem appropriate, this distribution? Just another way of looking at the outcomes.
Question.
Yeah.
Did you just look at it after the fact, or did you see this?
Yeah, we looked at it after. We did not plan it. We didn't plan that out. Yeah, we just
came out.
We did constrain ourselves to keeping within the first 3 levels, but the distribution was not pre-planned.
Okay, thank you.
And that interest in staying those first 3 levels again, because we've had some comments about, missing the higher order objectives in there that, we want to teach to our college students, for example. So what was your thought by keeping it into those 3 levels?
Yeah, that discussion was back to that idea about programs that go deeper, like a Cisco program. If you take it through CCNA or CCNP, it's definitely going to go to higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. But this program was not meant to be a specialization that goes in depth. It was meant to be a wider program that focused on IT core fundamentals. And those core fundamentals, as you mentioned in the previous project, they could lead to workforce. They could also lead to transfer. So if you assume that somebody was completing an associate's degree with IT core competencies and then went on to a bachelor's degree, that's where they would get the upper levels.
Just to add to that, I know our curriculum committee, they will not pass a course unless we have higher level.
This is interesting.
We won't pass any of these courses if we just have the bottom 3.
That's right. Yeah, credit courses require the higher level.
Yes.
So that's interesting. I mean, I don't mean to minimize that. I hear what you're saying, and I certainly think there's room for discussion. We'll definitely take that feedback back and bring it back to committee. But one thing that's nice about the way that this is structured is that those outcomes are free-floating outcomes. So for any given course, you can have some of these outcomes, and you can also have some outcomes that are not from this list that could be higher level. So so adhering to this doesn't prevent you from using higher level outcomes. They're just not pre-listed here.
You're exceeding the expectations of these guidelines.
If you get higher,
There you go.
For better.
Wow, wouldn't that look good for accreditation?
I think what this is trying to do is give a baseline for what every IT student needs to know and be able to do, regardless of what concentration they are in. So therefore, this is not something that defines a program or even a course. It defines the fundamental knowledge base of every IT student. So whether you're in database, whether you're in networking, whether you're in whatever, you need to know every bit of this. And so, part of this is the discussions we've had with industry and also within program areas that says every networking student does need to have some programming. They need to have some database understanding. Whether they are concentrating in networking, they still need to know some of the digital media pieces or any of these other things, which is not the conversation that has happened in the past. It's been mostly, what do you need to know about networking to be a networking professional, not what does every single IT student need to know and be able to do across that.
Very well said. I can't tell you how many times that same kind of phraseology came up in our discussions. We would be arguing, or I shouldn't say arguing, debating about a given outcome, whether this should be included or not included, and the question that was kind of our litmus was, is this something that all IT students need, or is this a darling of one area or another? So that's very well said. Thank you. Okay.
So the next steps, after we get the feedback, which is due in a week, the final guidelines should be out in the second quarter of this year. We'll put that together. And again, just want to note these two things. The call for course examples, we talked a little bit about that earlier. We'd like to include in our final draft some examples of actual courses that map those course outcomes to the outcomes in this curricular guidance. So if you might be interested in that, please get in touch with us. And also, we're looking for industry champions. So if you work for a company and you might be interested in listing your company as an industry champion of these guidelines, please get in touch with us as well. So again, IT discipline so closely tied to industry, we want to have that connection. And of course, industry were involved in creating these guidelines as well. And then just a couple more notes, our ties with MPICT. So if you may have seen on the Q4 newsletter, MPICT newsletter that came out recently, there was, on the last page of the newsletter, it talked about these guidelines. You can go there and it encourages you to submit feedback. And then also you might be interested in this video. This is a video you can watch on YouTube, and this was an interview that was done with James Jones from MPICT and Bob Campbell, the vice chair of our committee. And so they talk about the project in that video. And also, if you are an ACM member or an ACM CCECC member, you may subscribe to Inroads. And these are just a couple of columns, a couple of places that this work was discussed in various stages in Inroads. And our last slide just gives our full committee. So Beth Hawthorne, who's listening in, is our committee chair. Bob Campbell is our vice chair, and then the remaining membership is Jim, myself, and Cindy Tucker. And this is our website, capspace.org, all kinds of good information there. And if you want to send us any feedback on these draft guidelines that we talked about, you can do that at capspace.org/contact us. There's a form there you can fill out.
I should comment that this membership is the standard membership. We also have dozens of affiliate members that have contributed to this project and many other projects over time. Again, one of our main goals here is to try to get feedback. So if you have continuing ideas, please don't hesitate to go to this link or go to CapSpace and send us feedback that way. If you have ideas festering right now and you'd like to jot it down, we'd take it. We definitely would take it. We're certainly been paying attention as we've talked and are going to already have several things to bring back.
I just wanted to make a comment. If you look on here, it says January 2013, and if you go to the link, it also says January 2013. So I just wanted to let people know that we still have one more week.
You're not a year late. There we go. All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you.
I'd like a comment or two. So, first of all, just thank you, and I'm going to step over here where I can be heard and I don't have to try to type this for the benefit of people online. But there's been an extraordinary need for this or something like this for a long, long time. This wild, wild west era of IT has just got to stop because it's not working. It's not meeting our needs. We need some sort of standard common structure and assurance to employers that there's some common body of knowledge that's being conveyed. And you hear IBM talk about their T-shaped individual with a broad-based set of competencies that sort of cover the spectrum of the field. And then the need for some sort of unique value add, a specialization in addition to that. So what this is addressing and what the Department of Labor model addressed is that horizontal bar on the T-shaped individual. What does everybody need to know and be able to do regardless of their role? And I like to comment that this is not a program recommendation, but rather the foundation for a program. There is still a need for specialization on top of this. The degree is not in foundation. The degree is in something or another that provides at least this foundation. And we've been grappling with this. People have been grappling with this all over the country. I think it's fabulous to have the credibility of ACM behind something. I think it's fabulous to have the mapping to the different sources that you've done here, including the Department of Labor IT competency model.
MPICT did a study here in California. We got 782 employers to say, yeah, this stuff in the IT competency model, we need that at least. But they're weak verbs. It's familiarity. You know, we want people who can work with others in the team who are the specialists in all of these different areas. They understand their lingo. And the efforts in the previous session by Richard and Rupa and Marcus should be consistent with what's coming out of this model here, because they align with the Department of Labor model. So to the extent that you've got mapping between what you've done here at ACM and the IT model from the Department of Labor, the curriculum recommendations being developed in California should map. And those have specific course recommendations, and they build in some common certifications, A+, Network+, Security+, because that makes it easier to build a pathway up from the high schools. And you know, one of the comments in the online chatter was, we need one ring to rule them all. We really do have to line up on something. I'd just really like to applaud this work and encourage everyone to submit comments about this, because it really is valuable. We need something like this as an educator community and as an employer community.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, it occurred to me that we never got back to the assessment piece. I know we're just about out of time, but it's worth popping up. 4 minutes. Yeah, since we have just a few minutes, if you just want to go straight to cap space.
Is that the review now? We can just scroll out. Yeah, scroll out from here.
We just never made it back. If you keep going, I think that here we are. Just wanted to show this because I had meant to come back to it and got ahead of myself. So here are the outcomes, and then here are the 3-tiered assessment model where you get a picture of what it looks like for a student to meet the expectations, fall below or right above. And so that's mapped for each and every one of those 48. And these have been vetted and discussed again to the point where we feel fairly strongly they make some sense, but again, we value your feedback, so if you're finding things that need tweak, let us know.
Yeah, the exceeding expectation are higher level thinking skills.
Some of them are, yeah.
Comparing.
That's right.
Did you have a comment? Did that comment?
Philosophically speaking, I believe that you need to have higher end elements of improved taxonomy. Yeah. If you listen to what all the people in business say, they want people who can critically think. They need people who do more than these three. So there's nothing wrong with this. It's a great start. So I would urge you to
aim higher.
Yeah, I think exceeds expectations should be exceeds expectations.
Thank you.
And if you ask employers about it, you may be interested in what they're doing.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, any other comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you.